I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order while they're working on that, and Representative Hardin will open with a prayer.
Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we come today to join our hearts in prayer, first of all, Father, to praise your holy name, to thank you for all your goodness toward us, and to ask you, Father, that you would guide us as we deliberate today on the business of our state and the people in it. Father, we pray for your guidance in those issues. And Father, we also would remember in our prayer this morning Representative Carla Drenner and the death of her friend. These things we pray in your most holy name. Amen. Amen.
All right, well, Buck, I might need you to get me my mics back. Sorry, y'all. I don't want to hit cancel and have to do this all over again. So I tried there. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Representative Hardin, why don't we go with you with your committee report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Resource Management Subcommittee met yesterday, March 5th, 2014, and heard Senate Bill 333, Senate Bill 361, Senate Bill 296, and House Resolution 1185. All measures were approved unanimously.
Thank you. And Representative Riley, your number 25, okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Environmental Quality Subcommittee met yesterday, March 5th, 2014, and heard Senate Resolution 896 by Senator Tolleson and Senate Bill 299 by Senator Gooch. Senate Resolution 896 was adopted unanimously, and Senate Bill 299 received all ayes and one abstention. That's my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your reports. And Senator Tolleson, I think you have 3 bills before the committee. If you'll just take the day. I think some of the members are awake. We'll see.
Move y'all right along. Thank you very much. Good to be with everybody this morning.
And first on our list is Senate Bill 333.
Right. Senate
Okay.
Bill 333 is actually a bill, too, that y'all have already passed out of the House, and I've got over in my committee, which I'll be shepherding on through. But basically what that does, if you have a piece of property that gets put on the hazardous site inventory list, this just gives you a right for a hearing, which right now you don't really have. And that's all that bill does. It just gives the landowner a right for a hearing. Call it a hearing or right of appeal. But that is what that bill does.
Thank you. And let's look at the committee. Any questions? Number 28.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, since you had to pass that bill and bring us, that mean no House bills are going to pass the Senate?
I always move House bills through my committee.
Oh, okay.
Next question.
Just yanking your chain this morning.
It ain't about whose name on it, it's about getting the job done.
And then number 15.
Madam Chairman, since Chairman Tolleson has made the statement he wasn't going to make me come to his committee and present the bill, I move do pass on this.
Always working for you, brother.
Any seconds? Seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Thank you, Senator. You have Senate Bill 333. You know the rules process to get your bill on the rules. So.
I have heard that before. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me. My mind is a terrible thing sometimes.
And then next on our list is Senate Bill 296.
Right, and that is the Jekyll Island bill, which y'all have already had a Jekyll Island bill in the House and passed it out. And it's in my committee, and we'll be hearing it on Tuesday, I believe, is when it's on the calendar. So, this is just the preservation of Jekyll Island. In 2007, I believe it was, we passed a redevelopment act of Jekyll Island, so we now have a new convention center, a couple of new hotels, and new town center is going to be going up. So you're actually going to have people come back and having conventions at Jekyll again. But yet we want to preserve Jekyll Island for future generations. And this bill, as y'all have already had it before, we took the percent number out of the law because it's vague as to how that's figured, and we're carving in the amount of acres that is developed already on Jekyll Island and adding about 78 acres to it, and that's to give Jekyll Island Authority the ability to manage the island over the decades ahead. You never know when you may have to build a new water treatment plant or whatever, and you're going to have something available when you want to do that, some acreage available. So this preserves Jekyll Island, and I don't know if y'all been there in a long time, but it is beautiful. And I think that this bill preserves it for the future generations that are coming up behind us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a couple of questions, I think. Number 15 question or no? No? Okay. All right. Number 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we heard testimony from Representative Mark Hamilton and his bill. Is this the exact same language?
Exactly.
At
They're
the
duplicate bills.
Okay. At the appropriate time, Madam Chair, I'd offer a motion.
No more questions, so this is the time.
I move do pass.
Second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have that bill. And then our next bill is Senate Resolution 896.
Right, and this is a joint study committee with the House and Senate on the Georgia Legacy program. And we feel like, you know, you do these things and set them up, and then people come and people go in this building, and we want to make sure to have a study committee set up to go back through the program, look at the acres that are involved in it, look at how we're funding everything, and so everybody will have a current knowledge of the program. And that's all this does, just sets up a joint House and Senate study committee on the Legacy program, which is, the Legacy program is great. It helps us balance our environment along with the growth of the state.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions? I see no questions at the proper time. Oh, is there a question? No. Oh, okay. Representative Riley? Is there a second? All in favor, aye. Any opposed? All right, Senator, thank you for
very much. I appreciate
your presentation.
We will be moving House bills in my committee this afternoon. So.
All right.
All right.
They like to hear that. Thank you, Senator. This,
Never comes over and has coffee with me early in the morning. You told him that first, you wouldn't have got out of it.
and our next bill is Senate Bill 299, and that's Senator Gooch. Senator, do you need that mic on as well up there? Or is okay.
I don't think so. We can't get the video machine to work properly. So
Okay.
we had some pretty pictures we wanted to show you this morning, but we can move forward without it. Good morning. I think I presented this bill to at least half of you yesterday afternoon, so I'm not going to go into all the detail that I went into yesterday, but I did bring a visual I wanted to pass out, and I'll ask Burns if he'll pass those around.
He'll give it to our assistant. We
Okay.
can pass it out.
Senate Bill 299 is relatively a short bill, but it's a bill that has a lot of impact in North Georgia. As I testified yesterday, if you look across the state from Macon north, you'll find a lot of reservoirs and intakes. That's primarily the water source for drinking water for cities and counties. Back in 1989 or 1990 timeframe, DNR adopted water protection measures across the state dealing with water supply watersheds and the protection of those water supplies. And they use pretty much what I would call a broad brush effect. They use an approach that basically is a one-size-fits-all approach. And it's something that hasn't really been enforced that well. It hasn't been enforced in North Georgia in the counties that I serve. When I was a county commissioner back in 2001, we built a reservoir, and to this day, the watershed protection plan has not been has not been implemented or adopted. And there's simply one reason for that. The one-size-fits-all approach definitely does not work up there. It required a 150-foot setback buffer on all streams, 7 miles upstream from the reservoir. And I'll ask Burns to turn the map around. We have a map to show you just a typical layout of a reservoir in North Georgia. Just about every community up there has some sort of an intake, whether it be on a river stream or a reservoir. In this particular case, this is in the Yehula Creek watershed. It's about a 36 square mile watershed. north of a reservoir that's about 165 acres in size. The yield on this reservoir is about 5.7 million gallons a day. The city of Dahlonega currently has the permit to withdraw the water from that. The county, however, does not get water from the lake. They buy their water from the city. The problem is, since the county refuses to adopt the arbitrary 150-foot buffers, like many other communities in North Georgia, the city is not allowed to sell any more water to the county. This issue has to be resolved before the county will be able to get their water that they're paying millions of dollars for. This reservoir is costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. They're not using it. So this bill simply allows for local control. It allows for flexibility, and it allows for the cities and the counties that own the reservoirs to adopt their own watershed protection plans and submit them to EPD. EPD will still set the parameters. They'll still set the procedures and the criteria for these watershed protection plans. The cities and counties will have flexibility, however, in adopting those based on the topography, the hydrology, the slopes of the land, their land use. There's a lot of different variations that can go into a watershed protection plan. There's a lot of science today that's available that was not available back 20 years ago when the bill was originally adopted. So this basically puts the control back in the local government's hands where it belongs, and where I think most of you would feel the same, that your local control is much better than having a one-size-fits-all in Georgia. I can tell you what's good in South Georgia. It may not be good in North Georgia. I can tell you what's good in Atlanta may not be good in Dahlonega. One thing that works well down here in Atlanta won't work at all up there. And people talk about streams. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll end and take questions. The definition of a perennial stream is written in the code section. And up in my part of the world where I live, a stream that flows into this reservoir could be the width of your hand. It could run year-round. It could actually be a ditch. One of the photographs that I have on my little stick here is a picture of a ditch that runs down in front of a cabin about 40 feet from the cabin. Under the current law, if the county had adopted the buffers under the current ordinance, that cabin would not be allowed to be permitted. It would not be allowed to be built. Even if it were 50 feet or 60 feet away from this small stream, it wouldn't be allowed to be built. We're talking about streams of water the width of my hand. I gave an illustration yesterday, and I'll repeat it this morning. If you stand on the 50-yard line of a football field, the width of that yard line is about the width of my hand. I would think everybody would agree to that. Now, a 150-foot buffer on both sides of that stream would be the length of that football field looking both directions. It's too much. It's excessive. It is a taking issue. It's a regulatory taking concern of a lot of the landowners in North Georgia. They're simply not willing to give up the use of their land for an arbitrary ruling that was put down years ago, and the county commissioners just simply are not going to adopt it. And so this amendment to this code section allows for the counties to work with the landowners, come up with a sensible, common sense approach to watershed protection, and then the EPD will have the final approval. So I hope you'll consider favorable passage of this bill and move it on to the floor of the House. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I'm looking to see if there are any questions. Committee. Number 24.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
To have you with us today. I apologize for not bringing this up in subcommittee, but the thought just occurred to me this morning. I know we've got representatives from Georgia's agricultural industry and forest industry this morning. Does this bill in any way impact either positively or negatively any issues related to production agriculture or forestry management?
That's a good question, Representative. There's no negative impact at all. In fact, if you look at the last two sentences of the bill that's underlined, those are the new language that we're putting in the bill. That references the code section dealing with the Soil Erosion Sedimentation Act, dealing with the 50-foot trout stream buffer and the 25-foot non-trout stream buffer, and best management practices and the variance procedures. Everything that's already codified in a different code section is referenced in this bill, and that takes care of just about every one of the concerns that we've had addressed. The agricultural communities have exemptions on a lot of things that development communities do not have. So in fact, I think this enhances their future value of their property, it preserves the fact that someday they may decide to sell their land and they'll be able to receive full value of it. We had people in our communities testify over the years that 30 to 50% of their land was being taken in these buffers. If you see on the illustration that I passed around, there's some small parcels, 1 to 2 acre parcels of land, where there's practically nowhere to put a house if you apply these buffers. And yes, you can go to get a variance or a hardship case variance from the EPD, but I can tell you that there are people that will come here and tell you that that is a very difficult process. It takes time. It takes 4 to 6 months, and it's not something we should put our landowners in a position to have to do. So this 50-foot buffer that's on the trout stream today is adequate. It works well. We haven't had any complaints in the 14 years that our reservoir's been in service in Dahlonega. We have not had one complaint about water quality. We have a $22 million water treatment plant there that takes care of the water treatment needs of the county and the city, and there's been no problems whatsoever. I think, though, going forward, that the county does need to adopt a watershed protection plan. This bill allows them to move forward and do that and still politically be able to adopt something that the landowners will work with us on.
Thank you. Number 18.
Senator, I think you just answered the question. I gathered from the desire to make changes and have the department decide for the local governments what their buffers should be outside of the ones established by Georgia law. If you had a preference of, was there a certain amount of feet that you were trying to get to? Sounds like you'd like for all of them to be 50 feet instead of the 150 leading into the drinking water reservoir.
That's a fair question. I'm not the one to decide whether it should be 50, 20, or 150 or 300. Some people think more is better. That may be a true statement. I believe that in some cases a wider buffer is needed, depending on all the other issues: land use, density, impervious surface, hydrology, soil types. You know, you can get into a wet, swampy area, and you wouldn't want to put a home or a road through that area. But I think that, again, goes back to the local control. It goes back to the local community and how their land lays, and there's a lot of issues. I can give you an example. In Atlanta, for example, in Fulton or DeKalb County, a typical density ordinance for a zoning ordinance may be 10 or 12 homes per acre. Some of you may live in an urban area. It's not unusual to see a dozen houses stacked on 1 acre of land side by side. You can literally walk from rooftop to rooftop in some of these neighborhoods. Where I live in North Georgia, typically we have a 1 acre minimum for a home. So, I think land use, densities, the land plan, all these things need to be taken into consideration when these communities submit their watershed protection plan. It doesn't just have to focus on buffers. It should focus on all these other issues as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. May I follow up with one more question?
Yes.
But basically, you're looking at how you can adjust the buffers so that you can do development, it sounds like, rather than the fact that buffers were originally passed to protect the water.
The 50-foot trout stream buffer in North Georgia will remain on the books. No one is asking to go below the 50-foot trout stream buffer. What we're looking for is flexibility and local control to not to necessarily develop people's lands, but to give them their property rights back. In my situation, in my community, in this illustration, they haven't adopted the extra buffers. So right now there's no protection on this water other than the 50-foot trout stream buffer. This revision in this bill will allow the county to go forward politically and do something that needs to be done to protect that watershed. So this is going to be a positive move, I think, for everyone, to allow the flexibility and do something that a lot of communities have really resisted to do. There's other counties that have testified that we've talked about this problem for 14 years now. There's other counties that have adopted the ordinance in order to get the permits, but they haven't gone forward and enforced the ordinance. So today they're on the ordinances are on the books, but they're not being enforced. So I think the enforcement part is necessary, but you have to enforce something that people are willing to comply with. And Lumpkin County, in this case, will not adopt the current policies and rules. So we're here today to give them something that they can work with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 15.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, is it not true that this map you gave us looks like it was taken in the wintertime by the fact there's no leaves on the trees and look like a fellow's feeding hay up in the top right corner? And it's not a topo map, but you just kind of got to guess that all the light green where the buffers are is the creek bottoms and the stream bottoms, and really the only place that a guy that's farming could actually use. And a lot of it, without going to a lot of expense of moving dirt, may be the only place he might could build a structure, which is prohibited in this 100. The farm is not, but the structure building is prohibited in 150. And if you back it off like it ought to be, it would make the landowner's property worth a whole lot more that he's paying high dollar taxes on anyway. Is that not true?
Yes, sir. You just argued my case for me. Mr. Chairman, you are 100% correct. In North Georgia, typically you have a lot of valleys and mountains, and you have these small streams, whether they're a foot wide or 20 feet wide, and that's where really the usable land is, within 100 or so feet of those streams. And then once you get back, maybe 100 feet or so back, the terrain typically turns straight up in a 30 or 40% slope. Now, I'll tell you, as a local guy, I've seen developers go in on top of the mountains, and any of you that have ever been over to Young Harris, the Brasstown Valley Resort, you'll see that you can put a house on the side of a mountain. If you've ever been to Highlands, North Carolina, or Gatlinburg, you can put a cabin on the side of a hill, and you can put a road on the side of that mountain. But I'll tell you that you'll do a lot more damage to the environment by cutting a road into the side of a cliff than you will if you do it with proper best management practices and you put it down there on a flatter slope. So, but you're correct. People have bought land over the years. They've inherited lands from their families over the years, and then arbitrarily a government comes in behind them and they take away the use of their land without compensating them for it. It's just not right. And I think that, you know, people have a right to use their land, but they also have an obligation to protect natural resources. This bill does that. It mandates that the local governments put together a watershed protection plan that EPD has the final control and say over. The EPD has looked at this bill. They've had input on it. We've had support from the Trout Unlimited folks. We've had support from GMA and ACCG on it. This bill works, and I think it'll be the resolution to a problem that's been ongoing for many, many years.
Thank you. And I see one last question, number 26.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, you and I think have spoken. I've dealt with this issues personally in Habersham County, but my question to you today, will Lumpkin County be the first county to, if this legislation were to pass, the first county that develops one of these types of plans? And do you have a sense of, will this be additional cost for the county government, and kind of a ballpark? I mean, I know we have the science. I agree with you 100% on the topography issues. Just want to get a sense of, are we kind of creating a new job, a new program for civil engineers? I'm for the bill. I'm a supporter of the bill. I'm just trying to understand where you see this headed.
That's a good question, Representative, and your Habersham community is very supportive of something to fix this problem. They were part of the group that came down here years ago. We had a rally of property owners. 300 to 400 property owners came down here in buses and rallied support for a similar bill. I would suspect, and this, let me tell you what Lumpkin County's already done. The commissioners met about 2 weeks ago, and they've already decided to form a task force of local stakeholders. They're going to put property owners on this committee. They're going to put people from the University of North Georgia on this committee, probably a biologist, someone in that field that's an expert. They're going to put people on that committee from the environmental community that may not support this bill today, but want to make sure we do something that's going to be a proactive measure going forward. And I suspect they're going to hire a professional engineer or some consultant that's qualified to help them, guide them through this process, to work with the EPD to create the first watershed protection plan that hopefully will become a model for other communities. And it would be a great project for a regional commission or, you know, our ARC type group that would come forward and help with that, because why repeat the same process over and over again? And I think that's a good question. Will it cost money? Yes, but it'll be it'll be like an expense that'll be borne by all of the taxpayers for the public good. And that's what we hear a lot of times is this watershed protection plan is for the public good. It should be paid for by the public as well, not just by a primary landowner that happens to own the property where the stream runs through.
Thank you. I see no questions, so at this time, Chair will entertain a motion. Okay, have a motion do pass. Any further questions? See number 27? Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Chair recognizes one no. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator, your process now. I don't think the rules chairman wants a chart. He just wants you.
I understand. I'll ask
in probably 2 minutes. So you did a great job with your bill. I'm just having fun with you.
I want to ask Representative Tanner to carry it.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. But do go by today to do the paperwork for rules. Okay. Thank you. Our next bill, Senator Carter. We've seen you before on this issue, Senator. Yes, we have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I bring before you today Senate Bill 361, and you are correct. This is something that you have seen before. This is a Georgia Geospatial Commission. Actually, when I was in the House some years ago, I started this process, and this commission was approved, and it had a sunset in it for 3 years, and that's why we're back now, is because it has sunset. It expired. It served a useful purpose, and we wanted to bring it back again because we feel like it's needed and there's more work to be done. The charge of the commission is simply to do an inventory of all the mapping processes within the state to make sure that all of them communicate and that all of the computer languages and all of the map languages communicate with each other so that they can overlay and that the maps can be read by one municipality, one county, and the other. The problem arose back again when I was in the House when we had been we were having the flood maps redrawn, which we are having another round of that done now. So that's why it's so important that we continue this on now. But when the flood maps were being drawn, we actually were going to try to notify the property owners that some of their property may have been changed and put into a floodplain or taken out of a floodplain. But we were told that we would have difficulty in identifying the property owners because the maps didn't overlay with the maps in the county. And that's what brought this about. And again, it served a useful purpose. It expired. We wanted to bring it back simply because we are going through another round of FEMA flood map revisions in the state now.
Can you speak to the makeup of the panel and the voluntary aspect
yes,
of it?
Yes, it is, as you say, completely voluntary, no cost to the state. There would be minimal. It will be overseen by the Department of Natural Resources, but there will be minimal involvement by staff. There will be some, but it will be minimal. It will be primarily representatives from Georgia Tech and other universities that use the GIS technology, just to make certain, again, that all the technology is communicating with each other throughout the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do I have any questions from the committee? At this time, move do pass. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Jerry,
thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee.
And go by the rules. Oh, and who's carrying your bill?
It's Representative Knight.
Knight, thank you.
Thank you.
And our final bill, if you look in your folders, was a bill that Representative Drenner presented yesterday in subcommittee. So I think a lot of our full committee has already heard about this bill, but in consideration of her obligations today, we have, I think, Representative Debbie Butner is going to carry. No, you can do this one. Well, you know what? We always make it a policy to go and face the committee. So let's do that. Thank you. Early morning exercise.
Nice to see y'all from this direction. It's my pleasure to ask you for your favorable consideration of House Resolution 1185 on behalf of Representative Drenner Last time this bill was brought, it was a privilege resolution, and this year it was made into a House resolution, so that's why we have it before us. It was a very successful program. It's called the Green Apple Day of Service, and basically it's an urging resolution for schools and communities to do volunteer projects that would enhance the awareness of sustainable living, really. It's not just buildings, but it's how we can live in a sustainable manner. It was very successful last year, and they've asked for the resolution to do it again this year. And the date for this is September 27th in 2014. So she's planning ahead.
Any questions from the committee? Have a move do pass. Second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you.
Representative, you have your bill for Representative Brenner. That completes the bills we have on our calendar for today. As always, at this time of year, please stay. Chair needs to make a comment. At this time of year, we need to be sure and stay, stay attuned to check our bulletin board. I don't know, we might do some other resolutions, but just look out for our announcements, and we're adjourned. Thank you.